Today we're here with Dean John Whitcomb at Coventry Cathedral in the UK. And John is a masterful storyteller. I would take your class in a minute. And he's working on a book right now on Dick Howard, who was the provost of the cathedral during the war years. Could you tell us a little bit again about how Coventry came to be targeted during World War II?
Sure. So we were a very industrial city. We're really the home of the automotive industry in the UK, sometimes described as being a little bit like the Detroit of England. So factories right next to us here in the cathedral, obviously during the war, dedicated to the war effort.
Yeah, exactly. And then what was it like to be here if you were here on the night of the bombing?
Oh, I think extraordinary. So the air raid sirens went off around 7 o'clock in the evening, and 500 Luftwaffe bombers came and crisscrossed the city for 11 hours at 6 o'clock in the morning before the all clear was sounded. Large shells to take out the roads and water mains, electricity, smaller shells to put holes in the top of buildings, and then 35,000 incendiaries to set the city on fire.
Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine the scene.
Yeah,
It must have been
yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
And you talked a little bit too earlier about just the decision to take out, destroy an entire city.
Absolutely. So just a few days before the raid, there'd been a banquet, I think, in Munich where Adolf Hitler had been a guest. It had been destroyed, and he'd said, it's been disturbed. And then he'd said, I want you to destroy a whole British city. And the term was coined in Germany to Coventrieren in Germany. In German, still a word used today. And so they set out to completely take out the first city outside London.
Yeah, it's astonishing. When I walked in the entryway,
Yeah.
I was so deeply moved.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think of how much energy we put into caring for a cathedral and for generations to do that and then lose it all in a single night.
Yeah, I think it was just so hard. And my predecessor, Dick Howard, just said, just watching this beautiful cathedral burn.
Yeah. But he had a reconciling heart. I mean, and that's part of the Coventry story
He
too.
totally did. And so trying to work out his response. So he'd been on the cathedral roof the night of the raid. He'd been trying to deal with the incendiaries. But it just was too big a job for him to do. So he wrote, we had to come down from the roof and watch our beautiful cathedral burn. It was like watching the crucifixion of Christ, he said. But then he came back in the next morning and he said, do you know, if we've shared in the crucifixion of Christ, we'll also share in Christ's resurrection. The cathedral will rise again. That became a mantra almost. The cathedral will rise again, we will rebuild. But then, more importantly, 6 weeks later, he stood almost where we're sitting today and delivered the Christmas Day message across the world service of the BBC. And he said, hard as it may be, we're seeking to banish all thoughts of revenge from our hearts and our minds, to build a kinder, a gentler, a more Christ-childlike sort of world. And so this movement of reconciliation as the expression of what it meant to experience resurrection went on from there.
Yeah, and I love you have the three-plan plank of and maybe you can share that with our
Sure.
our
And
viewers.
so almost immediately following the war, relationships started to be rebuilt with Germany, with peacemaking missions going out from Coventry to Kiel, and then later to places like Hamburg, Berlin, and probably most famously Dresden. And the first piece of work that they started to do was to heal the wounds of history. And then as that reconciliation movement grew and began to embrace many other forms of fracture in our world, alongside healing the wounds of history, we began to talk about learning to live with difference and celebrate diversity and building a culture of justice and peace. All of that flows out of our call from God to be reconcilers, spoken of by St. Paul when he said God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself and has committed to us the ministry, the message of reconciliation.
Yeah, and I feel like we're all brothers and sisters and siblings in that
Totally.
reconciliation.
Yeah, totally.
You mentioned too the sculpture that came from Dresden
Yeah.
as being like a memorial. When you were talking about having memorials for people that we'd harmed,
Yes.
I thought that was such a powerful,
Yeah.
because I think in the United States, as we start to memorialize what happened under slavery and with the indigenous peoples, that it's hard for us to adopt memorials that remind us of our own.
I think it's an area where we've learned a lot from the people in Germany, who, our new friends in Germany. The truth is that reconciliation has led to closer relationships with Germany than we ever had before. But in Germany, they're very good at being honest about the suffering that they have imposed. And in our country, and indeed in the States, we're much more reticent. We don't want to really accept blame or guilt or responsibility, even for acts of destruction, which at the time may have seemed the right thing to do, but in retrospect we go, oh really? So having a memorial to the people who were killed in Dresden in this space is really significant.
Yeah, it is. And I love when you spoke about this being a symbol of the crucifixion, and the beautiful cathedral on our right being the symbol of the resurrection.
Yeah.
How did they decide to build it in that particular style?
Well, there was a competition about how to rebuild a new cathedral. And Basil Spence, who was a Scots architect, drove down and he said, as I walked into this space where we are, it's still a cathedral. It's still a sacred and holy space, even though it has no roof, no pews, no pillars, no pulpit or organ, those things which are really not important. This is a holy space, so we need to keep this space. It's a place where we meet with God and the honesty of the brokenness of the world. But this isn't the end of the story. So next to it, we're going to put a new cathedral which speaks of God's hope and God's healing. So just as we're doing today, our visits to the cathedral start here with the honesty of the world. This is where many of us connect with God in a place of brokenness. But then God leads us in a journey of redemption, of salvation, of reconciliation through into a new place.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful for you, John. And we had that wonderful conversation 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think you're one of the inspiring peace leaders of our time. And
Well,
I'm grateful that you're our friend.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so good to have you here.
Yes,
Really
and so
good
we're
to
here
be
with
together.
John Whitcomb at Coventry Cathedral, and my name's Malcolm Clemens Young. I'm the Dean of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, California. Thanks for watching. More good news.